दीवाना पे सिमरू मैं ये जो हल्का हल्का सुरूर है ये तेरी नजर का कसूर है ये जो हल्का हल्का
Hello, Adab, Namaste. Welcome to India's Business Legends. Thank you so much for showing all the love to the entrepreneurial stories that we are bringing for you every week. I'm sure you're loving the inspirational journey of entrepreneurs. And this week, we are going to introduce you to somebody who's basically doing entrepreneurship but in a very different league. She's trying to create an impact in the society through her work, which is philanthropic in nature. So let's meet Dr. Gitanjali Chopra. Hello, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sophia. How are you?
I'm good. So, first up, I want you to explain to our viewers that the beautiful Qawwali show that we saw, how did you work it out and why was it conceived? It's a very novel idea when it comes to promoting an NGO and in fact to raise funds for it. So why did you think of it?
So, Jashn-e-Qawwali, which was held last month, was actually the
Right.
third edition. We've done two prior shows. One was in 2021 in the midst of COVID, and the second one was last year. When we first started Jashn-e-Qawwali, it was like I said, just in the second wave of COVID, and like every other person, artisans also were suffering. Musicians were suffering. Artisans, no performances, no way to eat. And we were supporting them with ration through our ration drives and daily meals program. But the artists themselves, a group from Rampur, the Niazi brothers, reached out and they asked us, if we could help them and their entire clan, which was a group of about 8 people and their families who were, lack of a better word, perishing. So we said, all right, instead of just, giving money, why not give them a chance to showcase what they do best, which is their talent, their Qawwali, and raise funds out of it. So Jashn-e-Qawwali was conceived during COVID, and it was an online one. So the first edition was in August, I think, August to September of 2021. It was done on Book My Show. And even for an online show, it did phenomenally well. We were able to raise funds, give the funds to the artists, and with the additional funds that we got, we were able to hold, a ration drive for the entire Rampur village.
Amazing.
So that's how it started. And then in 2022, it didn't really work out because I think people were getting back to normal. And last year we said, okay, let's get Jashn-e-Qawwali back. And last year we organized Jashn-e-Qawwali at the Shire Fort Auditorium with the Nizami Bandhu of Rockstar fame. And we raised funds for Sahas. Sahas is our skill development program, and it's called Sahas because it's for women facing or suffering from domestic abuse issues. And if they're unemployed, they're illiterate, they're being abused, and we just wanted to empower them, give them a sense of belonging, of livelihood. And so we said, okay, we need to raise funds for a center. So we organized Jashn-e-Qawwali too. And this year, you attended it, went off pretty well.
It was a beautiful show because we were there witnessing the show, the magic that they were able to create with it.
Yes, these were the Niazi brothers again, the original ones who came back from Rampur to perform. And this year we raised funds for our newly launched project, WB Rasoi. And it's a learning experience because, we are not event managers, but we try to put our best foot forward. Partners support us, like-minded people, donors, everybody comes together. And I think when you put your heart into something, it shows.
And I think all the volunteers who were there, they were also from your NGO.
Yes, so my entire team was volunteering, right from my graphics person to my field people to the CSR officer, name it. Everybody just, donned the role of volunteering and doing everything that went to make the show a success.
That's amazing. So we'll go back a little. How did you start your education and how did you end up here?
That's a long journey.
It is.
Yeah, so I did my schooling from CJM, Convent of Jesus and Mary in Delhi, and I was a very mediocre student for the majority of my life. And then I think 11th standard onwards, I became a little more focused. I was an art student. After that, right after school, I did journalism from Lady Shri Ram College. Journalism was a very new course at that point of
Right.
time, and I remember people kind of looked down upon us because, especially the established journalists, that journalism mein kya padhoge? Like, what is there to be taught? It comes naturally. But that was a 3-year course which I did from LSR, and the beauty of it was that I started working while in the first year itself. Not that I was forced to or I needed to, but because it was a requirement of the course, and that exposed me to a whole lot of things.
Part of your summer internship programs, right?
Yeah, summer internship, you had to get bylines, you had to
Right.
do internships in newspapers and TV channels. So I learned quite a lot very early. Even the projects that one had to do. I mean, I'm sure if I was doing another course, I would never have been exposed to all that I was during my 3 years doing journalism. Right after that, I think the whole kira of journalism got in, and I wanted to become a journalist. And I did. For some time, I did work.
Right.
And then I thought, okay, let me do a master's. And I applied and I got through NYU and Northwestern. Both of them were leading universities in the US. But unfortunately, at that point, they needed a 16th year of education. So in India, we have 12 plus 3,
Right.
right, in graduation, and then you move on to a master's. So in the US, you had 12 plus 4. So they said, okay, do a 4th year, and then we'll take you. We'll defer your admission. You can come back next year, but do something for 1 year. So then I had nothing to do, and I just by chance I enrolled into the JNU program, the entrance test for the masters, and I thought it was a waste because I remember there were about 4,800 odd people who were applying for the course in international studies, and only 60 were going to be selected. And out of the 60, there was also a reservation. So I said, okay, I have to do something for 1 year. Either I work or I study. And just as luck would have it, I didn't study for the exam, but somehow I got an all India position of 16. And I enrolled
Amazing.
myself into the master's program. I quite liked, politics, international politics. And soon the first year was over and I didn't want to leave it. So the master's left to an MPhil. The MPhil led to a PhD. And before I knew it, I was a doctor. And so academics that way was a part of me. In the middle, I also took up several courses abroad in Netherlands, in Italy. Initially, I used to study. And then at one point, I started teaching there as well.
Right.
So and then in academics, the flow of things is such that either you stay in academics, you start teaching, or you
Right.
go towards research.
True.
And I took the bent towards research, and I joined Center for Policy Research as a fellow, and I was there for about 4 years before life happened, and life in this case is wishes and blessings.
So we will move on towards what was that one incident which actually motivated you to start Wishes and Blessings? Was there a particular incident?
Yes. I often speak about it, and that is playing Holi with visually impaired children. So, just to cut a long story short, I think, so I belong to a Punjabi family, and giving back, charity are values which are embedded in us, since the time we are toddlers or even before. And every year, my late grandfather used to take me and my brother and the entire family to this school for visually impaired children on any special occasion, be it a birthday, anniversary, Diwali, Holi, anything. We would go to this school, and I remember that I don't remember in exact words or the exact time, but probably I think I was 8 or 9 years old when I had gone for a birthday celebration to this school, and this one kid, just tugged onto my pant and said, "Mera birthday kab aata hai?" And that question, I wouldn't have remembered because I was that tiny.
Right.
But because we were going back year after year, that memory didn't leave me. And I don't remember how I reacted, but my parents tell me that I was pretty upset for a long time because how is it possible that somebody does not know her or his birthday, especially a child?
Right.
You know, because for us, birthdays are special, right?
True, we're pampered.
Yeah, we need a party, we need a cake, we need friends, we need gifts, so on and so forth. And here's a child, almost as old as me, who doesn't know, you know,
Right.
when the birthday is. So I think that stayed with me. And when I lost my grandfather in 2012, it took me like a year to get over things. And I mean, I'm never over it, I still miss him. But in
You do.
2014, on his birthday, I actually went back to the same school. It took a lot of courage, you know, to go back, because it just brought back a whole lot of memories. And I went and I cut a cake there with the kids, and it was like a very nostalgic kind of a thing, nostalgic and emotional. And just when I was leaving, I just stopped. I don't know why. And I asked the children something that my dadu used to ask. And that was, मैं आपके लिए कुछ कर सकती हूँ? Because he would always ask the kids,
Right.
या आपको कुछ चाहिए? So I asked the same question, and to my utter shock, I still remember there were this group of 7-8 kids, and they said, "Didi, हमें होली खेलनी है." And A, I hated Holi, and B, I thought that, you know, Holi colors, and these children are 90 to 100% visually impaired, they can't see. How on earth are they going to play Holi?
So why did they want to play Holi?
They just expressed the wish to play Holi.
Okay.
So they said, Holi aa rahi hai, हमें होली खेलनी है. So I said, okay, and I walked out, and I remember just while going, I just kept thinking to myself that, you know, what kind of a bizarre wish is this? And next day, I was still working with CPR. I went back way back then, we used to have something known as Yahoo groups. So we had a, you know, team Yahoo group.
That was way back in 2000, I think.
Yeah, no, this was 2014. So we had this group, and I, you know, sent out a mail saying that, guys, you know, I went here, and this is a very bizarre request that these children, 120 of them, want to play Holi, and what do you suggest? And I remember I had gone out for a meeting, and when I came back to my room, my desk was flooded with envelopes. There were like 20-30 envelopes just lying there, and each one of them had money in it. Okay, and it was like varied amounts, 100, 200. There was 131 rupees, I still remember. And there was a note which said that, go for it, Geetu. Geetu is my pet name.
Right.
We're with you. And I thought to myself that, you know, go with what? And what are you guys trying to do? And anyways, long story short, collected that money, whatever was left, put it in myself, bought colors, bought fruities, some gujiyas, and asked the same people who contributed to come with me. And we went to this school for visually impaired to play Holi. And believe you me, I hated Holi till that day. And today, I don't love anything as much as Holi. Because when I played Holi with those children who couldn't see, children who did not even know what color is, such pure, unadulterated joy. I mean, even when I talk, I get goosebumps just imagining those faces. And it was mind-boggling, you know. And then I understood. I said, you know, this is what life is. This is what pure happiness is, and this is what I really want. You know, they say there's always a moment. So I think for me, it was that moment. I did not conceive of wishes and blessings at that moment, but I think that was the life-altering moment. And I went back, but you know, those images kept coming. We had clicked pictures, and I kept seeing those pictures. And then on my way back from office, I used to just see myself getting, you know, just landing up at the school and just spending more and more time. And I think within a week, 10 days, I knew that, you know, this is what I want to do, and this is where I want to be. And I always say that visually impaired children gave me my vision for life. And yeah, that's how Wishes and Blessings was conceived. And when I first voiced this to my parents and to my friends and family, they all thought, pagal ho gayi hai. You know, like, you've gone mad.
Of
Like,
course.
you know, like, you've done a PhD, you've studied, and I was in the middle of writing a book at that point of time. I'd written a book already, and, you know, things were going great, traveling the world, rubbing shoulders with who's who, policy makers, making policies,
Right.
UN, this, that. I mean, it was the works. And why would you want to leave it? I said, you want to do it on the side? I said, no, I don't want to do it on the side. This is what I want to do. And I remember this Holi, was around the end of March, and on the 25th of April, less than a month, I had Wishes and Blessings registered as an NGO, and since then there's been no looking back.
So, but then you only had this experience of giving charity. Running an NGO is an altogether different game,
Yes.
because you would understand that, you know, even if you have a few kids who are living with you, there are expenses that need to run. So I always compare running an NGO to running a business. Both ways, you've got to keep the money rolling in.
True.
Because, and also, you know, for entrepreneurship, you may possibly at some point of time say, okay, I'll cut down my profit and all, but here there is a certain amount that you need every month.
True.
Did you work that out initially?
When I first started, whatever I had saved, whatever I had earned, after working for 4 or 5 years, I pumped everything in. That was my initial, in your entrepreneurial language, the initial capital,
Right.
or the initial investment or whatever. So I decided to pump all that in.
So how much did you pump in, and what all did you set up with it?
I don't remember, and I don't want to remember because it was everything at that point. All I can say is that for some months my bank balance was zero, but I did have the support of my parents, and I was lucky enough to be in a family where I didn't have to earn to eat.
Right.
So I think in that sense, the family support, the kind of support system in terms of friends, extended family, or even the kind immediate family that I came from, played a very, very important role in making me in making me become who I am today. And so initially when I started, I was able to get my documentation and stuff in place. And I knew I had a clear vision. I did not have experience of working with an NGO, but I had studied about international NGOs because that's what my MPhil was in.
Right.
So, I did have some sort of an idea, and I feel that every single day is a learning lesson. Just to tell you something which I should be ashamed of, but I'm actually, it just humbles me every time I talk about it. So in our language, everybody knows what an ATG is. An ATG is basically a tax exemption clause, in the
For
Income Tax
NGOs.
Act. Yeah. So every time you donate to an NGO and the NGO has an ATG registration, you get a 50% tax exemption. So I had applied for this, and I got it. And I was so excited. And that time I had a Facebook page. So, very promptly I went to the Facebook page and I typed, great achievement for Wishes and Blessings today. We have the A, T, and G, the numerics, the alphabets. And I wrote that. And, I felt very happy. And suddenly one of the people I knew, he's a donor, he wrote on a comment, congratulations Gitanjali, but it is not ATG, it's ATG, as in, the numerical. And I felt so silly. First I thought, should I just delete it? Then I said, and I remember his name is Radhe Rathi. I said, Radhe, thank you so much. Just shows how much I need to learn. And I think he felt embarrassed and he deleted his comment. And then, coming from there, when I didn't even know what an ATG is, and I actually thought, ATG must be A and T and G. So, I mean, that just kind of showcased the kind of learning that's happened over the trajectory of 10 years now. And funding that way, a lot of people feel that, funding is the biggest challenge in an NGO. I beg to differ. I feel that if you're doing the right thing, and your heart is in the right place, funds come. It's not, there are times when there is a shortage, there's a time when, there's an overflow, but funds are something which find their way. And I think I've been very lucky that way, because every time I have kind of, envisioned something new, it just comes. So, for example, when I set up my old age home, Manka Tilak, I had an idea to set it up. I discussed it with a few people, and I was like, but I don't have the funds to do it. I set it up in 2018, 4 years after setting up Wishes and Blessings. And suddenly I get this one yellow envelope, again from that same person, Mr. Rathi. And he said, I heard through someone that you're looking for an old age home. This is my contribution. It was a check for 1 lakh rupees.
Oh, nice.
So, and I was like, I said, I can't thank you enough, because the thing was in my mind that I want to start it, but it just came. And so on with other programs as well. Every time, and I feel when there is a clarity of vision and you want to do
Right.
something, funds find a way, right? And then when they don't, then we have ways. We think of fundraisers, we think of reaching out to people whom we feel would be able to contribute. And then we also, CSR helps.
Right.
So
I want
corporate
you to
funding.
talk a little more about CSR. How does it help NGOs?
See, CSR, India was one of the first countries to actually make it compulsory for companies to, contribute towards CSR as a part of their profits. And initially, a lot of companies came forward. And, like we have the Companies Act and the various schedules under which you can contribute. And, but I think post-COVID, what's happened is that a whole lot of corporates have made their own NGOs or own
They have.
foundations. So CSR funding in that sense has kind of dried up. But I feel the companies that have been associated with us, from the beginning, we've been lucky that they haven't left. I think they like what we do, and we're completely accountable and transparent. And so is our paperwork. So we've been
Right.
able to do that. We keep hearing of, funds being dried out. But then the thing is that, there are 100 ways of getting funds, but you still need those ways to show where you're using the money. You're using the money for the right purpose, and it's actually making an impact. So if the impact evaluation is not there, no company is going to come back to you. If you
Right.
don't give your paperwork, you don't, file all your utilization certificates or your impact assessment reports, or you don't maintain that kind of transparency with your donor, be it a CSR or an individual donor, there will be a time when they'll just shy away.
Right.
So, but I think we've been very blessed in terms of having support.
So there must be challenging days as well. And like you mentioned that, there are days when you're short on funds. How do you sail through those days?
So I think, touchwood, we've never had an issue where we've completely dried up. Like initially during COVID days, the amount of work that was piling up and the amount of relief that was needed and the kind of funds we had initially, they were not measuring up. And all it took was one call, like one social media call that this is the plan, so we want you to help. So, when you have a plan of action and you have people who trust you, and because you've actually paved a way for yourself and your work speaks, every time there is a shortfall or there is a new project, we somehow manage to
Right.
get those funds. But I think more than funding, the real problem in this sector, like I said, that people feel it's funding, but it's not, at least in my head, it's about trust. I think trust deficit is the biggest challenge for NGOs.
Right.
Because it's not just the lack of trust when it comes to donors or people who want to give you money. It's even on the part of beneficiaries who want to receive. Because I remember when I was setting up my first old age home, the idea was to set it up for women itself, not for men, just for women. And the catalyst was this one headline I read in the papers which said that a 82-year-old woman was raped in a public park.
It was a major news
Yes.
at that time.
And that time I felt that, I need to make a home for elderly women. Like imagine an 82-year-old woman being
Right.
raped. So we said we are going to set up Man Ka Tilak, and Google still says old age home for women. So when we started doing research and we started going out into the field, there were questions like, सिर्फ औरतों को क्यों रखोगे? क्या करना चाहते हो?
Right.
Right? So, it came as such a shock that you are trying to do good. You're trying to set up a free of cost home, give all facilities, and people are actually questioning your intent. And then the thing is, they're questioning your intent because they have reason to. There have been enough number of people who've been misled and enough number of people doing mischief in the name of old age homes or NGOs. So, to build up that trust, even with Rasoi, our latest project, we give out food to 500 people for 5 rupees. Now, see, 5 rupees is not the cost of a plate. We also know
Of
that.
course.
The only reason I'm doing 5 rupees is because I want people to have a sense of dignity and self-respect. A lot of people don't take free food.
Right.
You know, even if they spend 5 rupees, they'll feel कि मैंने कमाया है, मैंने खाया है, right? And the second thing is that if you're buying something, no matter even if it's worth 1 rupee, you will not waste it.
That
Right?
is
So this
very
was
true.
my dual thinking in terms of setting up Rasoi. So initially when we started doing this, there were people and saying, खराब खाना है जो 5 रुपए में दे रहे हो. You know, so that mentality of people not having trust or a trust deficit is the biggest challenge. That particular case, I picked it up and I ate it myself. I said, मैंने खा लिया, आप भी खा लीजिए.
That's the only way.
You know, so that is, and so sometimes it's easy, I could just eat it, but sometimes it's very difficult to build that trust.
Right.
And then trust building takes forever, takes 1 little second for it to get
True.
over. So I think trust is the biggest issue.
And I think you've had 1 decade,
yes,
of
we
experience.
just turned 10.
10. So that trust must have built by now.
There have been cases, I mean, all sorts of people make the world. So yeah, I mean, Touchwood, we do have a reputation of being a clean organization. We're one of the few ones who actually put up all our papers, including our balance sheets, on our website, because we have nothing to hide.
Right. So Gitanjali, how many centers have you had over 10 years?
We've had
And
a
how many-
lot. Some of them have closed down, some of them have doubled up.
How many people are you impacting on a daily basis or a monthly basis?
I think that impact can be measured by, not measured, but seen in terms of the number of programs and the number of states. So currently we're active in 6 states, and right now we're working on 6 main causes. The first one is education. And in education, we don't have a school or something. You know, we have formal education wherein we send children to schools, already established schools, by finding donors for support.
That's
Right?
beautiful.
So it's basically if a child wants to go to school, but the parents in the family don't have the means, we find a donor who will be willing to, you know, sponsor that child's education, and we have to make sure that the donor is real and the child is real, the genuine cases. We also have an interesting concept of informal education because, you know, the government has a whole lot of schools, schemes, midday meal, free this, free that, you know, for underprivileged children. But the question is, and the real issue is that you can't pick up a child from the street and put him or her into school. You have to make the child school ready. So
Right.
we have centers in Delhi and in Jharkhand, you know, which make children school ready. So
Okay.
we call this program the Street to School initiative, and I think you were there, the team
Yeah,
was
yeah,
there
we
today.
were there.
So basically we pick up, we ask, you know, we send out teachers and field officers to slum areas, you know, children selling vegetables or chips or begging on the streets, and we get them into our centers, we make them school ready. And we have 3 such centers right now, and they've been operating since 2015. We had 2 others which shut down during COVID. So I think till now over 1,000 kids have passed through those 4 centers, and now they all have aspirations of not selling vegetables but becoming IPS or doctors or
nice.
teachers. And then we've recently started Open Pathshala, wherein, you know, when you can't have an infrastructure available to you, we teach children who are willing to learn on the street itself. So this is what we do in education. We have 2 old age homes now, one in Delhi and one in Vrindavan. And these are open to anybody and everybody who needs help, you know, neglected, abused, abandoned, and even out of will. If they want to come and live, it's completely free of cost. All amenities are provided. We plan to open a 3rd one in the near future. Fingers crossed about that. The 3rd main area we work on is food and nutrition. We have the daily meals program in which we serve 2,000 people on a daily basis, 3 meals a day. And this is active in 6 states. So we have operations in Delhi, in UP, in Jharkhand, in West Bengal, in Karnataka, and in Tamil Nadu. These are the 6 states with daily meals. Recently, we've started Rasoi. I just spoke about
Yeah,
that
you spoke
under the
about
daily meals program. We started Sahas last
Yes, you
year,
did.
which is the skill development program for women. That also is a very, very touching and something very close to my heart, because, you know, we have women who are not even allowed to leave their home. And the interesting part here was that we started Sahas in the premises of our old age home. So
Okay.
these women used to come, from their families, from their homes, saying कि हम वृद्ध आश्रम में जा रहे हैं सेवा करने, right? And वो सेवा, like they would talk to people and stuff, but we would actually train them.
And what were you teaching them? Training
Sewing,
them with?
sewing and stitching,
Oh,
tailoring.
Right.
So, and now just last month we had this lady who earned 1,500 rupees by stitching 3 suits. And when she came and she met, she would just not, like she was just crying. She broke down saying that it's the first time I've ever earned money. So that sense of independence comes in, and
Right.
it just started like that. Now we have a proper setup for Sahas with sewing machines, and in fact, at Jashne Ka Wali, we even had a small stall. These were the women who are now making merchandise, and we have plans that maybe in the future we'll start retailing these products, and so that these women can actually become truly independent. After that, these are our 4 main programs. We work on relief. Relief is mostly SOS, be it a natural disaster, calamity, COVID, winter relief, wherein we distribute things that bring warmth. And in summer relief, umbrellas are given out. Right now, we've just launched our Sharbat drives.
Okay.
So, whatever people need in terms of relief, that's what we do. And the 6th area is something very, very fluid, and I think it's something which is unique to us, which is customized charity. Because see, charity is something very personal, and your idea of charity might be very different from mine. So we as an organization offer you customized charity options, wherein you tell us that this is what I want to do, this is the kind of budget I have, can you help me do that? To give you a small example, we had this one lady who had lost her mother to diabetes. So she wanted to help out a diabetic child. So we were able to find a diabetic child in one of the orphanages we support. And from a highly diabetic child, she was able to become a borderline one by means of the medicine. In the same vein, there was a corporate who wanted to make a classroom in in a government school next to their factory in Noida, and we don't know how to build classrooms, right? We're not architects, but we were able to facilitate that as an NGO partner. So, that's what we do. And within, again, numbers are very difficult to give, but this would give you an idea. 6 states, daily, I can't say how many people, but quite a few.
Which is a very humbling number that you've given us. I'm sure you must be sleeping in peace at night.
I wish I could.
No?
Sleep
sense of
deprivation comes
happiness.
with I try to sleep without any worry. Matlab, I don't have to think, but there's the nature of work is such that you are always thinking.
Right.
But then it's not the kind of thinking I mind. So it's a good feeling.
Right. You are being very humble about the kind of impact that you're delivering to people across. There is also one more thing which I want to talk about, which is the Vrindavan old age home, which is completely different from what we see here in Delhi.
True.
How is that panning out? People call you Ma there.
Yes.
Such a young Ma.
Not that young, but yeah, younger than most of my children, I guess. So, see, every place has its own culture. And when you venture out, especially, if you're sitting in the capital, there's so
Right.
much that you haven't seen. Rituals, customs, beliefs. So, when we set up the Brindavan home, it was something I wanted to do because I had visited Brindavan earlier during a winter drive where we had given out relief. And I saw a lot of women on the road, a lot of men also. And, when we asked them, they said, we've left places, but we don't have a place to stay. A lot of homes, old age homes or ashrams in Brindavan charge. We do not charge anything. There is no fee. And, when homes start charging, what these people do is they go out, they beg, and they give the money, and then they stay. So then, the idea was to expand Man Ka Tilak, expand the whole belief and the vision behind this and take it to Brindavan. So
So did it happen on a visit, or you just came to know about
the
them?
first time I visited Brindavan, I had that vision that, we would start a home. And after we, started Man Ka Tilak in Delhi, so the Brindavan home just turned 2 and the Delhi home just turned 6. So 4 years after the Man Ka Tilak in Delhi, we started Man Ka Tilak Brindavan. So it's a nice sweet home. The rituals, customs are very, very heartwarming. Most of the women there are either from Bengal or Assam, and I can't converse with them because I don't know Assamese or Bengali. But I think we have this, language of love, so to
Right.
say, and the kind of affection. Some of them speak tuta puta Hindi, and I speak tuta puta Bengali, bhalo, and so we have this conversation, or the caretaker translates for us, and they're very nice, very loving people, and they truly value what they have, or what they have now. Um, their customs, rituals are very different. Like, they'll get up at 4 in the morning. In my Delhi home, nobody gets up before 7. They'll first 1 hour they'll only be doing their pujas. They'll first be doing their cleanliness rituals, and then puja, and the whole day passes with puja, kirtan, part. Interestingly, every time they use the washroom, even if it is just to pee, they will take a bath, because they feel that they have become impure. Now, for a person like us, for people like us, it's a little difficult to digest. That how many times in a day will you actually
you do
take a
that?
shower? But for them, that is the way they've been brought up.
Right.
And that is what they do. Like, even before eating, putting bhog is something most families do, right? But putting bhog is what, a 1-minute thing for us, but for them it's a 15-minute ritual. First they'll do all kinds of narrations, then everybody will come, put one bite of their food, and then they'll actually sit down. And even the interesting thing is, last time I was there, they will not sit on a table.
Oh.
Okay, though they are old and we had tables for them, they will sit on the ground, no matter what. I mean, it's a sight to see them get up, the kind of struggle they have getting up from the thing. They need support, but they will not sit on a table or a chair. They will sit niche, because that is how food is meant to be eaten. And each one has a different thing. So, one amma will start eating, the other one will do a personal prayer, the third one will put roti outside. So, everything is, and the beauty of it is, all of them live together in harmony.
Right.
Not to say they don't fight. The fights are also meant to be seen and to believed. How can such God-fearing people, soft-spoken people fight? But I think women will be women and men will be men in that sense.
More than that, I think it's about when you start living together as a family, you do start having those differences also. People don't
but
fight when they don't have that.
That is family. I mean, that is the only family for them.
Right.
Because then they form relations. So when I go, all of them are white-haired, 70, 80, one is 92. Ma aa gayi. So, the first time I said Ma aa gayi, and then I looked here, there, who's come, and then one of them said you, and I said, I can call you Ma. You're as old as my grandmother.
Right.
But no, they will call me Ma only. Because then, when we had a conversation, they said a very, very, very touching thing. They said, we feel at home. We feel like what we felt at our mother's house.
That's so beautiful.
So, so we get the same comfort and joy here.
Right.
And then, like, each one will come, bless you. Like, meeting and leaving takes the maximum time in Vrindavan for me. The amount of time I sit chatting or interacting or eating or whatever is on one side, and when I go, because each one of them wants
Right.
to bless you, wants to meet you, wants to hug you, sometimes
That's
even
so
slap
sweet.
you because you haven't come for a long time. And then while going, they'll catch hold of your hand. Fir kab
Don't
aaogi?
go. Oh.
So,
Right.
So it's a nice, like, every time if I ever feel down or about, it's one of the centers that I need
It can
to
totally
reach
lift
to.
you up.
And I think thanks to technology, even if I can't go myself, we can do video calls and
Right.
connect.
You can do that. So, what does the future look like? Nobody knows that, but then do you have something in your mind?
Every time I think that I'm going to kind of curb down the work or the expanse, life happens and we just boomerang. So, there's just so much to do in the world of charity. There's so many people who are suffering. There's so many people who need support that, each day is a new day, in that sense, a new learning, a new experience, and this just leads you to something else. And my team laughs at me because every time I have a meeting and I say, okay, this year no more projects, and then I'll have the older ones, with their raised eyebrows. Yeah, we'll see. So we do have a couple of projects lined up, but taking it one step at a time.
Sure.
Because I think that's the way it should. But yeah, the mission, the vision remains the same, making wishes come true and spreading smiles wherever we go.
That's beautiful. And thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
It was amazing to know about the entire journey and the kind of impact that you're creating.
Thank you so much.
So this was Dr. Gitanjali Chopra with us, who's creating immense impact on the lives of many, not just children, but elderlies also. And the impact that she's creating, you can also help her in creating that kind of an impact by donating to her. Because now we know that when we donate to an NGO, the kind of multifold impact it can bring in the lives of not just one, but so many people will just put a smile on your own face. So stay tuned. We'll be back with yet another episode next time. Goodbye for now.